Hi, and welcome to the Introduction to the Child Protection and GBV offline modules. In this video, I will be covering what WRAP is and what are the GBV and Child Protection offline modules in WRAP. We'll also cover the purpose of the Child Protection and GBV modules, how to use them and access them, and as well as the dissemination and timeline of the offline modules. So what are the GBV and Child Protection offline modules? You might or might not have heard of something called RESCO or RESCO CRM Mobile. It is an offline application software by Microsoft, and this is what we have used to build our offline modules. So this is the foundation. Within that, we have then modified it to become a tool that is aligned with our proGres V4 online platform. And we named it originally the WRAP, so Rapid Application. When it was originally built, it was built for the registration modules. And so that is the foundation of our offline modules. So whenever you hear of WRAP, that means at least there is a registration modules that can be used offline. Now, since the original development of WRAP, we've gone ahead and we have created additional modules within this application. And these are the GBV and Child Protection modules. In addition to the registration GBV and Child Protection modules, there is a voluntary repatriation module in development at the moment. So depending upon what you plan on using WRAP for, you will always have the registration module, and then depending upon your access rights, you might be able to use it as well for your GBV, Child Protection, or voluntary repatriation case management. When we developed the offline modules, the idea is that we would have a way to take the information that we have data entered online in the online version of proGres V4, and it would be able to be stored and update an offline version that could then be data entry could be done into. And then when the offline version would be able to then connect to internet again, it would then be able to update the online version of V4. Thus, it would always be anticipated that we would, in context where the offline module would be used, that there would always be this consistent syncing between the online version of V4 and the offline version WRAP for the most up-to-date information to be available in proGres. But in addition to this, the purpose for the development of the offline modules was obviously, first and foremost, many of our colleagues work in context with low connectivity, and we needed a solution that would allow them to access the benefits of the online proGres V4 in a way that didn't require as much connection and would allow them to more easily manipulate the platform so that they can get to the information they need to do the work they need to do. In addition to this making V4 accessible to low connection contexts, it also allows for greater documentation on the move. So it would allow for colleagues who aren't just sitting at a desk all day, but are needing to move around and do their work with individuals on the go, that they could then do their documentation more easily. Especially for those who are on the move, it would allow for this documentation to be done in a manner that is more secure than perhaps just pencil and paper. When documentation and notes are taken in the WRAP application, they have the same stringent security models and user profiles as we find in the proGres V4 online version, meaning that the data is quite secure even when you're not just sitting in a more secured office. Another big benefit of the offline modules is that it actually has quite an easy to use user interface. So a lot of people find that while the content is exactly the same as the online version of V4, it allows users to move back and forth between the different modules and entities and do data entry in a much more intuitive way. It also allows for the usage of V4 and WRAP to be fit for purpose. So it allows for a much more streamlined, efficient purpose-based user experience and not requiring a lot of additional work where perhaps it's not necessary for documentation, but just for the system itself. Additionally, we find that this can make this V4 much more accessible to partners, as many partners in contexts where we have low connectivity might have even less. So this is one way where we can make the system of V4 an actual possible option for them in terms of their case management. And finally, as we've been developing interoperability with our CPIMS Plus/Primero colleagues, we've done this through the offline module of V4. Thus, both the online and the offline version will allow for interoperability functionality so that referrals can be sent to and from V4 and WRAP to CPIMS Plus and back to the child protection module. So how to use the offline modules? There are about 6 steps to really implementing the offline modules. The first one is investigate. And what that means is you can go to Prime Support, you can look into the user guide materials there, as well as some of the basic information around how the system works, what are the minimum requirements. You can even listen to some of these how-to videos on the offline modules to get an idea if the modules are an appropriate solution for your context with your specific setup. Once you've identified that the modules are an appropriate solution for you, or you think they are, you can then go to the next step, which is to request access to WRAP. Now, what this means is that you would go to, again, Prime Support, and there you can find a request form for being granted access to the offline module. When you complete this form, it will ask different questions around the setup in your context, what you're looking for, to allow primes to support you in thinking through what would be necessary for the planning of this implementation. Now, usually before we suggest starting with the offline, we do suggest that folks have been trained on the online version of V4 so that there's some basic understanding of the modules themselves. This can really help for you to understand as part of the investigation as well as part of the requesting steps what would really be necessary in terms of how do you expect to use those modules before we even get into then the addition of the offline modules. Step 3 is to allocate. And what we mean by that is with the offline modules, only one device can be used per one individual, meaning you need to think through clearly what is the plan in terms of usage of devices for the offline modules, and do you have those devices allocated already, or is it necessary to plan the allocation of budget, both for devices as well as for training and other steps to implement the offline modules. Once you've done this, then step 4 is to plan and configure. So there are a few different options, quite technical options in terms of how the offline modules will be set up. You would work with the primes colleagues to determine what is the best setup for your location. For example, this could be whether you use client or application directly to server and back for syncing, or if we need to implement a field server, which might be necessary in certain contexts where perhaps connectivity is even more problematic. This planning really is quite technical and would require consultations both with the programmatic people in country, both with the technical people in the region and at HQ, as well as the GBV and child protection staff, to make sure that we are again implementing and planning this based upon the case management needs in that context. Next, step 5 is training. Now, it's very, very important that before people start to use the offline modules, as we mentioned, they already have been trained on the GBV and child protection modules as they are, and then they can also be trained on the offline modules. It is really important that we start with a UNHCR staff so that they understand the tools clearly, and then once that's well ingrained and they have started to use it, then we look towards training partner staff, so that we can first explain to them what the systems are, how they work, make sure that we can answer any questions they have when they're deciding whether or not they want to use V4 or the offline modules. And then step 6 is to start using it. We really recommend that right after you do the training, that the team starts to use the tools, because that will ensure there's a good uptake in usage as well as people remembering kind of what they have just learned. That's why it's so important before the training that we do all these things such as allocation and planning, so that there's not a large delay between the training and the usage of the modules. And finally, we'll talk about the dissemination and timeline. We piloted the CP and the GBV offline modules in late 2021 and have been testing and fixing some bugs through 2022. And during this year as well, we have been creating how-to videos for the offline modules to answer your questions as you start to use these, as well as training materials. Now in 2023, we are going to be in a position to support the go live of the offline module in context. So if you are an operation or a regional bureau focal point who believes that the offline tool will be an important asset to your work, it's important to start planning for the rollout and making your plans known so that we can see how support can be provided to new rollouts. So for support, as we mentioned, there is the Prime Support website, which is on the intranet. But in addition to that, you can always contact proGres for technical support, the Global Service Desk, or the Prime Support team. And then if you have specific questions about GBV or CP, I am for case management technical support. So that could be either what it takes to implement the GBV or child protection modules, or how these interact with your case management. You can contact Jessica Stewart-Clark for child protection and Christiana Bongbo for GBV. Additionally, you can always go to your regional focal points or your in-country focal points as well, and they can help you find the solutions you need.